start this meeting. So, welcome to the RDA meeting. It is Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. And to keep everyone healthy and safe, we continue to host hybrid RDA meetings. Our meetings are public, and you're welcome to join us in person or by watching from the City Council's agenda page, Facebook, YouTube, or SLC TV. We hope you'll continue to join us in whichever manner you feel more comfortable. We begin our meeting with comments to the board. I'd like to remind you that written comments may be submitted to RDA offices via mail to P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. We're accepting your comments in person and online through WebEx. I want to mention our rules of the quorum guidelines to help our meeting progress in an orderly, civil, efficient way. We want to give everyone the opportunity to voice their opinions without feeling intimidated. In order to achieve this, our rules of the quorum begin the moment from the moment you arrive in person or into our virtual meeting. The RDA board respects all points of view, and we welcome new insights. Please be respectful. Avoid yelling, profanity, or making racial slurs, obscene or defamatory remarks. If you violate this rule, your line will be muted or you will be asked to stop. If you feel you need to use profanity or disrespectful remarks to express your point, you're welcome to email board members or call our comment line. In addition, our staff will request your name during the WebEx registration process. To limit disruption, your name cannot include a message or violate our rules of the quorum. If your name doesn't meet this requirement, then our staff will make contact with you to gather that information.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we're having some audio difficulty on the WebEx line.
Okay. I can stop for a moment.
And it has been reported that it's returned. Thank you.
All right. Never mind. I don't know where I left, but I'm going to start here. If your name doesn't meet this requirement, then our staff will make contact with you to gather that information. For those joining in WebEx, please monitor your chat in case we try to reach you. Scott Corpani from our staff is helping to moderate the meeting and will be messaging with the attendees to coordinate on any questions with your commenting registration. Staff is handling a number of tasks. Please limit messages to technical issues and minimal changes to your registration. Taylor Hill and our staff will be calling the names of those who wish to comment. We will call names of people joining on WebEx and in person based on the order of registration or received comment cards. When it is your turn to speak, Taylor will announce your name. And for people in WebEx, she will unmute your line and you may begin. For people in person, please step up to the podium, and if you have a mask, please feel free to remove it before making a comment. Once you begin, please state your name and the 2-minute timer will start. We will now open our general comment period. Taylor, please start with our first comment. All right, well, thank you. Is there anyone here in person that hasn't registered and would like to speak? All right, I don't see anyone. So we have no public hearings today, so we're moving on to item C1, and that's the approval of minutes. So I would need a motion to approve the minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the meeting minutes of October 11th, 2022 and October 18th, 2022.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Dugan, seconded by Board Member Fowler. I'm going to roll call, but first, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to roll call, starting with Board Member Petro.
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
Fowler.
Yes.
Is Wharton or Pui or Mano available online? No, I don't think they are. No. Okay. So, and I'm a yes. So that passes 4-3 and 3 being absent. We're moving on to item 2, RDA audit review and approval for fiscal year 21-22. And the board will review and consider approval of the fiscal year 2021-22, an audit that shows the agency's financial conditions as of June 30th of 2022. So at the table, we'll have Danny Walls, Mary Beth Thompson, Michael Michelson, and then Paul Skeen. Thank you. Hi.
Go ahead, do it. No, I was going to introduce Mary Beth, but first I also wanted, before we have Mike speak, I want to give a shout out to Mike Burns, who's our financial analyst within the finance department, who's heavily involved in the audit. I'm sure I'm stealing Mary Beth's thunder on this, but from RDA staff standpoint, we wanted to make sure we acknowledge his effort and thank him for all the work he does.
So I think we'll turn over the audit to Mike Michelson. The audit has been completed and finalized.
All
I
right.
think you all have received the audit. I think I sent it Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, I don't know. They're all a blur. So if you haven't, let me know and we can forward that to you. I will turn it over to Mike Michelson.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, even remotely. I apologize for not being there in person. It took my wife 2 hours to get to her work today, and our daughter had surgery a week ago, so I'm at home with her, although she's doing very well now. As Danny said, we appreciate working with Mike and staff at the RDA on the audit. For the most part, it went very well. We are a little bit late, and most of that deals with implementing a new accounting standard this year that just took us a little bit of extra time to do. And so that's the reason we're a little bit late in presenting this year. If you have those, it looks like the share option for me is grayed out. So if you will turn to page 2 in the financial statements, that is our auditor's report. If you were to lay this down next to last year's, you would see that the format is different. So I want to draw some, or point out some specific reasons why and the reason for the changes to the auditor's report. So the audit standards that we follow have changed and required now that when we begin our opinion, we start with the opinion. So the opinion used to be at the end of our report, but now it's at the very beginning. So our opinion is there. It is an unmodified opinion that states that the financial statements are fairly presented in relation to generally accepted accounting principles. The next section deals with the basis for our opinion and talks about the auditing standards that we're required to follow. And those are generally accepted auditing standards that are established by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. The next section deals with the responsibilities of management. Management is responsible for the financial statements and their fair presentation, as well as the underlying accounting for significant and individual transactions. The second paragraph under that section is new. Management has always had the responsibility to evaluate an entity's ability to continue as a going concern. But with the change to the audit standards and the change to our report, that is written here in the report under management's responsibilities to emphasize that management has that responsibility and has fulfilled that responsibility. Going to page 3, the auditor's responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements, this section is changed as well. So there are several bullet points of things that we're responsible to do, as well as that preceding paragraph. So it talks about the things that we've discussed with you in prior presentations, the fact that we establish a materiality threshold, that we assess risk, that we look at internal control. It also mentions that we are required to exercise professional judgment and maintain professional skepticism. So as I said at the beginning, even though we enjoy working very much with Mike and the RDA staff and get along well, we still have to have some professional skepticism that there could be pressures or something in their lives that might cause maybe a breakdown in internal control or a temptation to circumvent internal control or something like that. So we're not saying there is. We just always have to maintain that skepticism that that could be the case so that we're maintaining our professional responsibilities. So then the required supplementary information section refers to the MD&A and the pension schedules at the back. We don't provide a full opinion on those, but we have done some limited procedures on those to say that they're fairly stated in relation to the financial statements. And they are required by GASB in the accounting standards for financial statements. Finally, on the last page, page 4, we talked about the supplementary information, which is 3 schedules at the back, which is some information by different fund that RDA works on, different project area, rather than funds, sorry. And we offer an interrelation opinion on that. So we've done limited procedures on those schedules to tie them out to the financial statements and make sure that they agree to the financial statements as a whole. So I'm not going to go through the financial statements themselves. There were a few journal entries that would make it different from what you've seen. All of those were provided to us by Mike Burns and the RDA staff. The largest one was to implement the lease standard. So the RDA leases parking structures and parking spaces to 3 different entities. And so in adopting that new accounting standard, a lease receivable was recorded and a deferred inflow for leases was also recorded. And there was no change to the beginning net position as a result of implementing the standard. Now that lease receivable and that deferred inflow will be amortized as the lease payments are received. So those were initially recorded by doing a present value calculation on the payments, the contractual payments under the lease agreements to adopt that standard. And you'll probably see that as we present in the other entities as well, especially when we get to the ACFR. There'll be a lease change there as well. So that would be the significant change in the financial statements from last year, is adopting that standard. We did issue a letter to the board as we're required and as we have always done. Hopefully you have that in your packets too. The first page of that refers to the responsibility we have under auditing standards that we've already discussed. So I'd like to go to page 2 on that letter. The top of that letter is new this year. So the accounting standard the auditing standard that I referred to that changed the auditor's report changed this letter too. So as part of our audit, we're always been required to identify what we think are the significant risks. And then we allocate our time according to where the significant risks are and where the materiality is and where we assess our risk. The audit standard now wants us to communicate to you, since you're charged with governance, what we determine to be the significant risks, so you're aware of that. So when disclosing these 2 items, they're not new risks and they're not bad risks and they're not a red flag or anything, but these are the things that we decided were risky in this audit, and so we planned our procedures accordingly to address these risks. Our audit standards require that we always consider management override of internal controls as a risk. And so that's presumptively mandatory by the audit standards, and so we do and design procedures to address that risk of override of management override of controls. One of those tests that we always do is journal entry testing, because that's one of the areas we feel that management has an opportunity to override those controls. For the RDA, with the volume of notes receivable and loans that it's made to people, the valuation of those loans is another area of risk. And so with the materiality of the loans, the nature of the transactions there, as well as the subjectivity to valuing those, the collectability of those, we spend a good chunk of time on the notes receivable. And so those are the two areas that we've determined to be significant risks in the audit. The significant accounting policies, it mentions there the adoption of the new lease standard. Significant accounting estimates are the same as they've been in the past. The net pension liability is an actuarially determined liability that gets allocated to the city by Utah Retirement Systems, and then the city allocates a portion to the RDA for the RDA employees. At the top of page 3 on that letter, the allowance for doubtful accounts for the home trust or the housing trust fund is a significant estimate as well. So that's management's estimate of what's collectible versus what's not, and there's been an allowance against the portion that may or may not be collected in the future. And so because that's subjective, we consider that to be a significant estimate. The rest of that letter is what you've seen before. So I've hit the highlights of that, and I know that you have other items on your agenda. I would be happy to answer questions that you might have at this time now.
Thank you, Michael. Board members, the floor is open for questions. If you have any. I don't see many people raising their hand. I do have questions, Michael, so when you said management override is a risk, who's the management in this case? And I unfortunately wasn't able to read the full report, but did you provide some solutions for it, so to minimize that risk?
Okay, so that's always a risk in any audit.
Okay.
We gain an understanding and document that understanding of controls in our work papers. In our opinion, the controls were sufficient, so we did not make any additional recommendations. But we do design and perform procedures to make sure that that risk is mitigated. As I mentioned, the journal entry testing is one of those. Now, I think you asked for an example or who might be overriding those controls. So that could come in a number of different forms. And being the large organization with multiple departments, I mean, we could look at the management of the RDA, and I'm not calling anybody out or suggesting this happened at all, but for example, Danny is the executive director, could have a bias or something he wanted to show in the financial statements and ask Mike to account for something a certain way. And that would be an example of override of internal controls.
Okay.
But I'm not saying that happened. I'm just offering an example.
Absolutely. No, I just want to understand the structure, not a person directly, just a structure when you say management, because I feel like we're also managers. So is it us that we are also
So Board Member Valdemoris, I think what they do is they test for this this is one of their significant tests. That's why it sits on your board letter, is they go and ensure the internal controls are there to their satisfaction as they walk through the audit. It's not saying that we have that in place where Danny could override the financials, because he couldn't. So I'll just make that clear, he couldn't. But they go through and test all of that work to ensure that they feel comfortable that management cannot go in and override.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. In my prior life, here's a really good example. The CFO of the company I worked for in a prior life actually padded the books by booking a receivable number that did not directly come from the subsystem receivable number. That would have been an audit finding under Mike's area, and I use that because it was significant to me when I found out, and this was like a prior life, so it was 100 years ago at least. Yeah. But that would have been a finding that Mike would have found as he walked through. He would have said, why does this accounts receivable subsystem not directly report into your balance sheet? Why are you just putting a number in there that you make up? Okay. They did it so that their books would look better, and so that it appeared that they were collecting their receivables. In actuality, they were not.
That makes sense.
Yep. Thank you, Mary Beth. That's a great explanation.
Thank you for the example. I don't have any other questions. I don't see any more questions, so we appreciate, I love this. Thank you for all the work that you do and the RDA and keeping the books as they are, which are great, obviously. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to, this is a short meeting, by the way, so we're going to go to item number 3, and it says informational, but I did want to discuss, just for a few minutes, we don't have to be too long about,
Madam Chair,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I believe we needed approval of the audit as per the agenda. So, sorry to jump in, but
An approval.
wanted to
you're
leave
right.
it. Thank you.
Okay, well,
So do
I
I
need
just
a
need to make a motion to approve the results of the audit? That's my
Second.
motion.
Second.
right. I have a motion by Board Member Fowler and seconded by Board Member Dugan. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to roll call this. Petro,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yes.
Mano,
Yes.
Wharton,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Pui,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, and that passes unanimously. So thank you for that audit. And now we're going to item number 3. And it was, I was just would like to, to spend a little time to talk about some of the leadership structures that we have as RDA and council, and the council chair may talk about this at another time, but it is, I've been involved with the RDA and the council for about 4 years now, going into my 5th year, and I think I've kind of learned some things that that I would like to bring to your attention, guys, just to move our work forward and also empower council members that might not be in leadership positions to be more involved in certain projects or project areas or policy changes as we move the city forward. There's a lot of work coming for the RDA. There's a lot of work coming to the city council next year, and sometimes our structure, the way we structure RDA chair, vice chair, and council chair, council chair and vice chair, seems to be a little bit uninviting to some of us that might not be in leadership positions but want to be more involved in a topic that we're super interested in, or a topic that is in our district, and we would like to be definitely more involved and put that energy that maybe other council members are not really interested in that topic. So some of the changes that are proposed, I talked to, I think, to all of you about it last week, but now there's an official memo of some of the changes that I would like to discuss, and this is up for discussion. We can pick and choose. We can make it clear on certain things that we are allowed to do as board members or council members. But 2 things that I wanted to perhaps amend our policies, to create a 3-member executive committee that would add a 3rd elected official to a chair and a vice chair position. So it's almost like a alternate vice chair to take the load off, maybe to the RDA, to the chair and vice chair, the load off in their work as they go to multiple meetings, and I'm sure it's hard to be super enthusiastic about every topic that the city and the RDA faces, and so that's one of the proposals. If that's something that you guys would like to consider, if something that you think it might work and it can help and ease the work of the chair and vice chair. Number 2, it's create a policy that allows the opportunity to, for us elected officials to champion a project, champion, lead, however we would like to call it, but and that might be somebody that is not in a leadership position. So basically, if Councilmember Mano is in not a leadership position, and his interest is in the District 5 project that he has passion for, the energy and the desire to help and be more involved. I would like that to be clear, that he might be able to do that without thinking that he's overstepping the chair of the vice chair, and obviously with the consent of the chair and the vice chair, that he might be able to, I don't know, work on the State Street project as an example. So those are the things that I've been thinking about this past 4 years that it hasn't been clear, so I wanted to bring it to our attention to make it clear in the record. These are the things that we could be doing from now on. So I'm opening the floor to discuss.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, hold on. I have Council Fowler.
Go ahead, Alejandro. You're in another country. I'll let you go first.
Before we lose connection.
So I thank you. I appreciate the call on this and talking about this, and I've been thinking a lot about it. I have mixed feelings, and the mixed feeling is I do like the idea of having council or board members that are interested in a specific project, and with the quote quote blessing of the chair and the vice chair to be some sort of conduit to make sure that we don't lose attention. Sometimes it's easy to lose attention. There's so many things coming to us day to day beyond our own objectives and goals. My concern with adding another third chair is that we're going to have almost a simple majority in almost closed meetings, meaning that a very close group of people could also have the power almost to vote and discuss things in a manner that might not be transparent to the public. I think that the process as it is right now is transparent enough. We all have a chance to make a case and to be elected as a chair and as a vice chair. Councilmember Valdemora, so board chair, you've been 2 years as a chair, and then before a vice chair, and you just said that 5 years. My concern is that we are going to create a line of leadership without opening it up for everybody to have a chance at that opportunity. It is not about a lack of leadership. We all have our own talents and our own expertise, but I think it could create an opportunity for some shenanigans. And when we create policies for the council, we need to be thinking about policies that are not about us, because I don't believe any of us will do that, but maybe a future council, when we may not be there, may use those rules against the citizens of Salt Lake. So I think that I do agree that I think having a structure to assign specific board members for specific projects, I think that is fantastic. I think it's great. But creating a second vice chair means that almost all of us, might as well all of us be vice chairs, right? Like what is the purpose of having a chair and a vice chair? And the other image is that, current chairs, eventually future former chairs might want to stay in some sort of involved in leadership. By jumping into a second vice chair position, which I don't think is appropriate. But so those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Great thoughts. Go ahead.
Thank you,
Councilmember
Madam
Fowler.
Chair. To piggyback a little bit on what Alejandro said, if we were to do this in RDA, to create a third person in RDA and a third person in the council, let's say, that's 6 people in leadership and 1 not. If we're talking about exclusivity, that one person probably feels like the most exclusive, like the most left out person of all of leadership, right? Of all of the council. And I think that, and that was actually something Councilmember Wharton or Board Member Wharton had to step out, but that was something he brought up to me that I hadn't thought about. And so I wanted to voice that of really, if this is making sure that council members or board members are involved, I think there is a couple of things that we can do besides necessarily changing leadership. Again, I agree with I hadn't thought of that point that Board Member Pui brought up, but totally agree with that. I mean, you are kind of looking at a simple majority and making decisions without ever telling the rest of the council members that you're making decisions, and that could happen pretty easily, actually. I think for me, as some of the things, because Board Chair Valdemoros, you did call, and I appreciate the call and having conversations with you. And it did make me think about like what if there's a different structure that we could have. And one of the things that Board Member Pui and I talked about is because I was in your same shoes, right? I did chair and 2 years of vice chair of the RDA. Is maybe having the chairperson right now, it's either in policy or written somewhere, or maybe just adopted by. Because we've been doing it, I don't know the answer to any of that, is that the chairperson is 2 years. And maybe to create more of this sort of fluidity and inclusivity and still having some consistency, there's a lot of ease there. We changed the RDA board chair from 2 years to 1 year. That's a suggestion that Alejandro, or Councilmember Pui and I have talked about. I think that then you're kind of allowing other people to be involved in the leadership role without an expectation that they can't because of that 2-year rule. And the other thing, I agree with the champion thing in the sense that I feel like we already do a lot of that. And I think it's a lot of just communication amongst ourselves in the sense that, I don't know if y'all remember the scooter ordinance, but I was vice chair and chair when all of that was happening. And I 1000% gave it to you and Chris because it affected your districts, but because you were interested in it. And I think that is how at least this body and the body before, when I was on a different council, were very good at. If there was something that interests, I mean, I can take, for example, Fairmont Park. That's my champion and that's my thing. And I don't know that I want to feel like I have to ask permission to be involved in that. I get it, but maybe, and again, this is something Chris brought up, and so I'm sort of acting for him right now since he had to step out, is suggesting a policy that if a project is being discussed, meaning in a small group between chair, vice chair, whether it be RDA or council, that third meeting spot be first invited to or first given the invitation to the council member whose district the project is in. And that they are getting the updates at the same time as the chair, vice chair, again, both, whether it be RDA or council. And I think that's a good policy. If it may be something that, for example, there's a project that is going on in Sugar House, and it turns out that, I mean, this, I can't imagine, but that I'm not that interested, but maybe Dan is, because we are very close, right? And so maybe it's right on 21st, and although it's in my district, it probably affects his constituents a little bit more. But if it comes to me and I'm like, no, this is more Dan, then it goes there. And to include that third person. And I think a lot of what you bring up, Board Chair Valdemoros, is communication amongst each other. And that's a lot of these things, and it's something you and I talked about when we talked before, is really how are we all communicating with each other? How's leadership communicating? Are there maybe some better policies regarding communication rather than structure?
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Go ahead.
I appreciate council members or board members Pui and Fowler's comments. I think that I do think we're already kind of letting council or board members and council members champion issues that they care about. I'm not necessarily opposed to making it an official thing, but I worry that if we make it this official, these are the sponsors of this ordinance, that when something that is really maybe popular among the constituents happens, that that there would be competition to become the sponsor for that, and then it would just become a political tool that you can say, oh, I sponsored that, 20-mile-per-hour speed limit thing or whatever, and that becomes like a feather in your cap. And I don't want our ordinances, I want our policies to be decided because they're good policies, not because they're political tools for us as elected officials. I remember one thing that I think Board Chair Fowler tried to do, but I think the COVID kind of made it difficult, but was having, I think, but it was good. I think you invited every council member to come to chair, vice chair on a rotating basis. I don't know, I think because it turned into virtual and everything else happened that year, it was difficult to maybe do that, but I liked the idea, and maybe it doesn't have to be the full chair, vice chair meeting. Maybe it's like, every fifth week you are invited to the second half of chair, vice chair, and you can sit there and discuss your initiatives with the chair and vice chair and leadership, council staff leadership at that. And I think that may be a better way to get more people involved than consolidating it into 3 people that really make all the decisions, and then the other 4 don't know what's going on. And I don't know if there's maybe lessons learned from that trial and whatnot that could be incorporated, but I wonder if that's not a better way. By the time, I do think it's notable that by the time 6 of 7 of us are in leadership, is it really leadership anymore?
I appreciate, sorry.
Yeah.
And I appreciate those comments. I was just thinking the opposite in terms of the 3 simple majority. I was thinking, well, a third one would disrupt that 2-person decision and then going for it. Like it would be like the third perspective that might not, the third person that might be like, no, even though both of you are saying this is the way we're going, or this is the project that we're going to prioritize, a third one could come say, hey, no, not really, because X, Y, and Z. And so I was completely like the opposite of, but I can see, it could go both ways. So I can see how it could be a simple majority, but it's not. And I can see why everybody's a leader, and then all of a sudden just one is left out. And then why do we have?
Madam Chair.
Again, should I go with you, Amy? Okay, go ahead.
Oh, me? No, I actually really like the suggestion from board member Mano, because that does equalize the issue, right? If we're talking about breaking some of that cliquish, and to be fair, I was the vice chair of the RDA. I'm still the vice chair of the RDA for a few more days, but I don't think board member Valdemoros and I created a cliquish by any chance of the imagination. But I do like the idea of democratizing or opening the doors a little more and having a rotating basis invitation from each council board member representing in each area. And that will actually give an opportunity to voice their projects and concerns and keep a tab on them, on things. I do like that a lot, but it is more of an informal thing, as not creating a new vice chair position into just because of the concerns I had that I voiced earlier.
All right, thank you. Fowler, Dugan, Mano.
Mine's really quick. I just wanted to, before I forget, I do like the idea of going to a 1-year term.
I have it in my notes.
Yeah, we mentioned that same thing today at the chair, vice chair, about why we have 2 years and why not go 1 year. So I think that I'd like follow-on conversation there. But I think one thing that we kind of touched on quite a bit here is the communication side of the house, and then I would add to that just how much time you have in energy to participate in other meetings. So opening them up is always welcome and always there. We just need to make sure that we continuously push that, the communication side of the house, and that your invitation to come to a meeting is open, and especially if it's in your district, you should be the first person to, so I like those ideas.
Go ahead, Petro.
I think there's also a really important leadership cultivation aspect to this, which the suggestion that never took off could help ameliorate. I know for me, having just completed my first year, it has been drinking from the fire hose, and to get that low pressure experience could really help us continue a pipeline of leadership cultivation in the council that will be important as we continue to transition and face really difficult things as our city grows. So I like this idea of opening it up and making sure that we're not just democratizing access to information, but also kind of conducting our own leadership cultivation within the council.
Thank you.
I just, if
Yeah, go ahead,
real quick,
Founder. Yeah.
just want to point out, I think we also, like, every chair, every vice chair for either side does their leadership the way they do it, and there's value in allowing that to happen as well. What Darren brought up is that I personally, the leadership, the retreat thing, I was like, man, I don't really want to do a retreat. We were about to head into, we didn't know COVID was coming, but it wasn't my thing. And so, but I thought it was more important to have one-on-ones with each of our council members, and we tried to do that as best we could. So I think we also have to give credence to the people that are in chair and vice chair. As Alejandro brought up, you know, we all run, we all get voted, it's between the seven of us, and we see it, and you know, there's good, bads, and uglies to all of us that ever happen to be in leadership. And so, you know, in some ways, I sort of always looked at my role, whether it be the RDA chair or the council chair, as I set the agenda. That's about as much power as I feel that I have. But realizing that may look like I'm prioritizing something. But I would hope that as anyone comes into leadership, that there's that open door of communication, that if something is really, really, really important to somebody, and the one power I have as chair is to set the agenda, then it can be like, oh, this has been really important and it's been talked about a lot of times, and now we need a decision, or whatever it may be, that I put it on an agenda, and I'm not like blocking it off of that. And so I think it's also important to remember, as we look at this, like what we each think of our role as being in leadership, and where we are there, and not to diminish how whomever is in that position, because it's different for all of us, right? And so I just came up with an idea and said, this is how I want to conduct it, because I don't want to do a retreat. That's really how it came up. Ask Cindy and Jen. And so I was like, this will be more one-on-one with everyone. And I think it's important that we all cultivate our own leadership, but I appreciate what Victoria said of like being able to be there so that there's sort of this will of continuity, which is why I think in the beginning there was 2 years for RDA chair, and why now it doesn't seem to make quite as much sense as maybe it did whenever that 2 years came about. And I'm looking to Danny as part of the historian there, but.
Thank you. So I appreciate the comments. I think what my takeaways are that there is an interest in doing the 1 year chair instead of the 2 year chair as RDA. The second point, the takeaway for me is, or at least that I liked, was whoever is the chair and the vice chair will, and there's an item coming up, a transmittal or something, or as you decide, or as we decide the agendas or the priorities or whatever that is, that the district representative will be invited first to, or at least informed, hey, this is what we're discussing. Is this something you're concerned? Is this something that you know, it needs further work, and do you want to take this on and be the champion of this? If this is all not obligatory, this is just informational and empowering those that might be interested to lead it and help the chair and vice chair, or with a consent and collaboration with the chair and vice chair, and then informing the rest of the board. And then the third thing that Danny and I and Kara talked about yesterday in the chair and the chair and vice chair meeting was, you know, they are willing and they offer to give us the priority list from the administration side early in the year, and then and the projects that they think they're work. And Danny, correct me if I'm wrong. And the priority list, and then informing the board. Here are the things earlier in the year, not later, like earlier. And then that way, a board member that is interested in championing one of those priorities have the chance to say, hey, I would like to take on this. And does that make sense? So if Danny, I don't know, says Granary District is something that we are going to work on, and these are the 5 things that I would like to see happen, then happens to be my district or very close to Darren's or very close to Alejandro's, maybe, one of us wants to be involved. And I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Danny, for offering that. Go ahead.
This is a question. That's why
Okay.
my hands raised really high, like I was in school.
Question.
Considering this is the last meeting of the year and the first meeting of the year, well, at least not for RDA, so, well, yes, but the first RDA meeting of the year is when we choose leadership and change things. Do we need a straw poll of some sort to look at this 2-year versus 1-year thing? Leadership thing? I'm using all of my big words, Katie.
Board members, the term of the chair and vice chair is set forth in the RDA's bylaws, and it would require an amendment to the bylaws. We can work on that, and that could be something that could be done immediately prior to voting for the new chair and vice chair, but I think we might need to think about timing on that, but if that's your direction, we could
Is
do
there
that.
any way to do it without opening up the bylaws, or it needs to be changed within the bylaws? Changed within the bylaws, okay.
And can it be voted after the fact, after the leadership is voted for?
I don't see there's a need to, we can do it afterwards, couldn't you?
Because the chair and vice chair are up for election this year, they could be elected with the acknowledgement that their term may not be as long as they expected when they ran for it. I think you all would want to put something in the record about that.
Technically, we could
possibly.
amend it in a year from now. I mean, 6 months from now, if that's,
I think it creates my one caveat is I think it creates an expectation for somebody who is in leadership that then sort of their role gets changed partway through their term. So I would recommend, if this is the board's intent, that it be done as quickly as possible so the leadership in those positions know the time that they'll be serving.
would it be helpful to maybe do a straw poll now and then, are there issues here that I'm not thinking of in bringing this up? Cindy?
Katie, I'm just thinking of a situation where if say the council or the RDA board elected someone as their chair, and then in July they said, oh, we don't like that chair anymore, we want to remove them. I don't think we have a mechanism to remove them. So, which is fine. But what I'm wondering is how then do we limit them to 1 year instead of 2 when the office they're elected to is a 2-year?
Thank you, Cindy. I think you and I, in some ways, are saying the same thing.
Okay.
But you make a really good point that there's that commitment up front for a 2-year term, and then it's being changed.
Yeah.
But if we do it now, then the expectation semi goes away.
Potentially, and I think Allison Parks and I can do some creative thinking about a way to potentially change this. That we've wanted to move some of the RDA's policies and rules into city code and out of the bylaws, because the RDA, it's not a nonprofit entity that really requires bylaws in the typical sense. And so this might be an opportunity for us to think creatively about that and make that change with your consent, obviously, prior to it.
Sorry, Dan, from maybe a direction standpoint, would it be helpful if we did a straw poll to see where everyone is on at least this without making any changes, but then we know maybe where the legal team needs to go and looking at it?
That would be helpful for us so that we can have that direction and move forward with the creative thinking.
Perfect. So I would make a straw poll to amend the chair position from 2 years to 1 year term.
Feelings. I am looking at everyone, including Pui, and everybody has their thumbs up, but Chris Wharton is absent.
And I would just look at that as saying we could vote on that before we do the election early on that first meeting, because we still have, the current chair still runs that first meeting, and we can have a discussion on that, vote on it, and then go forward at that point.
Is that okay, Katie? Is that
I think that would work, yes.
okay? Great. Let me put a note here. Vote on it on first meeting, January 10th. Okay. I have a question maybe to Cindy or to Katie about this. I'm not sure if you call it policy change, or is it a policy that we agreed upon that any council member or board member could be the champion of a project if the chair and vice chair, when the chair and vice chair proposes or is talking about an agenda or a project for that year, that they are the first ones to be notified and see if they might be able or desire to be part of it.
On the council side, we would put it in your policies. I don't know, Katie would have to address whether it would go in the bylaws of RDA. But this brings me to something like what Katie was suggesting, of moving some things from bylaws to ordinance. There are a lot of things where the RDA does it one way, and then there's just a slightly different way, policy-wise, that we do it in the council. And I just wonder if it would be okay with you if we could work with the mayor's office and the RDA administration and the city attorney to maybe on some of those key ones that get confusing a lot, come and say, here's what the council policy says, here's what the RDA bylaws say. Do you like one more than the other? Because it doesn't matter to us which one you choose, but it would be nice if we could get a little more uniformity, because you're the same people and we have a struggle keeping track of very subtle differences in the policies.
And I know we're January 10th is our next RDA meeting, so maybe is that possible to?
I think it's probably a longer term project that if the administration agrees to work with us on that, we could come, maybe in batches or something like that.
That's for changing it officially to see if we have to codify it or not. But I'm hoping that this meeting, as we talked in the open and discussed it, that it is, if you guys are, if you guys are comfortable with that, it is something that we can move forward coming the next year. So for those that are not in leadership and they are interested in a project, that they don't feel like they're overstepping, that they kind of assume that if they're interested in a project, they can champion it.
Madam Chair, if I,
Yeah.
Sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
No, I just was, we could write that up in a policy format like we would do on the council side, and then you could at least look at it to see if it's what you intended, and from there it could be figured out what to do next with it.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking of it as sort of as how we do legislative intents. We're kind of legislatively intenting our own selves.
Right.
Yes, I made all those words up. But right, of saying, we've talked about it, it's hard when we are very good at following the law and having open meetings, of talking about all these different things that don't seem to fall anywhere in agenda. So I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for kind of bringing this up so that we had some space to talk about some of these issues. And I think with that, it is sort of more of I would like to look at it as sort of that legislative intent, and maybe not quite that policy level, but more of just sort of, here is what we're intending all to do with each other type of idea.
Thanks.
Just
Yeah,
one.
go ahead. And then really quick, and then Mano, and then we have to, oh, you're done? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
maybe I'm just admitting guilty feeling, but sometimes when council members come to us as staff, we're thinking about the various policies where the chair and vice chair are the spokesperson for the council, and then so if another member, say if they're meeting with a group to negotiate something, and then another council member sets up separate meetings, we're always sort of cautioning, saying, ooh, this could accidentally end up to be negotiating against yourselves, and that sort of thing. So this might, having 3 people together just for those briefings and those meetings with outside groups, seems like it would work. We probably would need some help with you guys in terms of the other policies that are on the books and how you want us to deal with those so that we don't accidentally become a even bigger barrier than we are.
Thank you. All right. So I appreciate everybody's comments and discussion. I'm happy that we were able to talk about this in the open, and thank you for the time and thought that all of you have put into it. We're moving on to item number 4 of our agenda, and that's a report announcements from the executive director, which is a mayor, which I don't see her here. She was here earlier. I'm sure she had something else to do. And then to item number 5, report and announcements from RDA staff. So Danny, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, board members. We have just a few quick announcements to go through. First, we would like to welcome 3 new staff members to the RDA. Unfortunately, due to sickness, and we turned this day into a virtual snow day. They're not here in person, but we want to recognize them anyways, because you will start seeing them as part of what I think has been started to be called the RDA flash mob behind me. So project manager McKenna Hawley has come to us from Park City's planning division with municipal nonprofit experience. We have project coordinator Lucas Goodrich, who has been with the Salt Lake Chamber since 2018, most recently as the program director for the Downtown Alliance's Cultural Core program in the blocks. And then project coordinator Marcus Lee, who's been a financial analyst with the Utah Association of Counties, and most recently with Lewis Young Robertson Birmingham. All 3 of them are extremely capable and started hitting the ground running. You can see by these hires, as well as our more recent ones, that we are really starting to fill our areas of expertise with planning, arts and culture, and financials. So we're excited to have them on board and join the staff that we have also hired over the past year. Item number 2 for staffing is to recognize Director Talitha Day and maintenance facility employee Daniel Rivera with the Galvin Center. Both of them this week hit their 20 years with the city. So certainly wanted to recognize them, give a shout out, and tell them how much we appreciate their effort and dedication, especially considering Galvin turns 30 years this year. They certainly have been there for a long portion of that. Next subject, project areas. We wanted to inform the board that the county council tonight will hold a public hearing and receive comment to hopefully vote on the State Street project area approval, finally. So we're thrilled to announce that. We don't anticipate any issues based on their discussion last week and hope to have that approved. You as a board, once that is approved by the county, will take 2 actions on that. Number 1, you will obviously approve that interlocal agreement on the RDA side as well, and then you will also approve an amended budget for the project area. You technically approved a draft when that project area was approved, and then as we went out and negotiated the interlocal agreements with the city, the county, and the school district, we modified those budgets to reflect what their actual participation is. So now we need to have you come back and approve just that final formal budget. So those will hopefully come to you in the next month or so for approval, but we're excited to have that project area approved and completed. And then the developers of the silos on 5th, the affordable housing project there, have notified us of their intent to release the $2.36 million in funding that they were approved as part of last year's NOFA. Unfortunately, they stated that for a variety of reasons, the budget for the project no longer pencils for them and makes sense, so they have released those funds. RDA staff will include those funds in what you will see next month as part of this year's notice of funding availability, and that will be added to the total, which is probably good because we released $6 million in funds, got $18 million in requests, so a little extra money will help to cut that up. Yes, please, Director Mona.
Go ahead, yeah. And then
Great that there's a use for that money, but is that project completely dead, or it's just no longer an affordable project?
Before you answer that, can you remind me what project that was?
Back
I'm
to
going to
the-
ask if Tracy's in the office to come
Fifth
up.
South across the street from the
You want
Maverick.
to come up and speak to it, Tracy?
Fifth South as you enter the freeway.
It's south
I'll
across the
put Tracy on the
street
spot who
from-
can give more details on the,
White building, look.
Like
with
a old
silos,
cereal
old
factory or
cereal
something? It's
factory.
cool.
Yeah.
It's
Fifth
It's
South,
like the
right
grain,
before the
the
freeway.
big grain
Northwest.
company one, right? Okay.
Those.
They were gonna do some cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate, but yeah.
Tracy's going to pull up some information so we can get you the scope of the
Take
project.
it offline too, if
Yeah.
we're running out of time.
Right.
But I just hope that that doesn't get torn down.
Do you,
My understanding, I believe it's still happening, it's just not, I think the affordability piece is not.
portion has gone
Bad.
away? Okay, that's, yeah,
Okay.
that's very unfortunate. Go
And
ahead,
so
Danny.
that adds how much to the NOFA?
2.36 million.
And so what will the total of the NOFA be?
8.36.
8.36. And do we still have, NOFA for high opportunity areas?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
2.7, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
No, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate being able to give that information. And then finally, last item, we have delivered hard copies of our 2022 annual report to all of you. Hopefully those have been distributed. We do a much more limited run of the physical copies, but we do have a digital version online. So if there's anyone who you want to send that to or reference to, that is available. So
Thank you so much,
that
Danny.
are all the updates we have, unless you have questions.
I don't have any questions. Anybody else? I don't see. Okay. All right, thank you. We don't have written briefings. We don't have consent agenda, so we do have a closed session, so we need a motion for that.
Madam Chair, I move that we enter closed session for the purposes of property disposition, purchase and sale, and advice of counsel.
Second.
Thank you. Second.
Excuse me, Madam
Yeah, go
Chair. I
ahead.
just want to make sure if you're coming back to RDA or if you're doing these
No, we're not coming
presentations
back to
after.
RDA.
Okay,
This is,
later?
we could
Okay,
do it.
thank you.
Can we do this during the break? I'm sorry.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Just after a closed session.
Sorry about that.
I have something for the board members. All right. So I have motion by by Board Member Mano, seconded by Board Member Fowler. I'm going to roll call this. Petro,
Yes.
Dugan.
Yes.
Mano,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Pui.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, and Wharton is absent. So thank you so much for whoever is online. Please log off if you're not supposed to be there, and whoever in the room as well that is not supposed to be here, please leave the room and come back later to our work session. Thank you.